right, what's going on, everybody? Today has been an interesting day. A lot of players entering the transfer portal. We've got some players announcing they're returning to college, some going to the NFL draft. Alfred and myself are going to try and cover as much of that as possible for you guys tonight. I'm still monitoring Twitter to see if anything breaks. I was hearing rumors that we're going to hear another big name entering. I don't know who it's going to be. Haven't seen who it's going to be yet. Hopefully that happens tonight while we're doing this. But I mean, Alfred, we've got everybody who follows this knows you are a massive Gators fan. I think we've got to start with the news that came out today. Anthony Richardson declares for the NFL draft. He's been a major point of contention for us here at Campus Decan, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of that, a lot of us wanted to see him come back to school to develop. But he goes to the NFL draft, and I personally don't hate that. What are your thoughts now as he heads on to the NFL draft?
Yeah, I saw your tweets earlier, and you were like, I'll take him if he goes in the first round. I'll take him at pick 6 in a dynasty draft or something like that, or a startup for rookies. And I don't hate that idea. I have to say I watched him all year. I watched basically every snap. It's my team, etc. Don't think he's NFL ready. I don't think he's NFL caliber. I mean, I'm frustrated how he's playing against Vanderbilt. How is he going to play against, what the Cleveland defense we just saw last weekend? So it's very strange, or it's not strange. It's hard to say what to do with him. I've been thinking of comps. People are throwing out Cam Newton. People are throwing out about Josh Allen. And those guys make sense because they're big, they run, and they were inaccurate in college. Cam was great, but Cam's great season was his 4th year. He went 2 years at Florida, a JUCO year where he wasn't incredible. He was good at Blinn College, which is a JUCO, but he was like honorable mention All-American even for JUCOs. So he wasn't like setting the world on fire. He goes to Auburn, and of course the rest is history. But it was his 4th year. Josh Allen is the 1 out of 1,000 that actually hits his theoretical ceiling. So where does AR fit there? What if he did come back for a 4th year and he did light the world on fire? Then he would be the 101. So it's weird. I'm not sure I can say there's been a quarterback with these tools who didn't put it together in the first 3 years that still went to the draft. Most of these guys, Bo Nix transfers to Oregon, has an incredible 4th year. What would have happened if he had that time to take that leap in college? We'll see if he can take in the NFL. I don't hate betting on the traits, but man, right now, I don't see how you could, reliably start him in a professional football game.
Yeah, I don't mind it. We've talked a lot about him, as I mentioned, and this definitely opens up room for Florida, which we're about to get into some of the quarterbacks that have jumped in the transfer portal here. I thought it was a good move for him because a lot of people did want him to transfer out of Florida. Whether he stay, I either think he had to stay at Florida or go to the NFL. And I say that because I don't know with how much we've talked about, and even the NFL draft circles talked about, he still needs to develop a little bit more, especially as a passer. He's incredibly dynamic as a runner. You could argue one of the best athletes on the field every time he steps on the field. If he goes to a different offense, a different school, I'd be worried about him having to learn a new offense while also trying to develop as a passer like the NFL wants him to. So at least now, you would think if he's going to the NFL, and I mean, you've been talking about this in our Discord and behind the scenes for weeks now. Like I'm hearing he's probably leaving. So you've been on this for weeks. I would think it's because he's getting some kind of good draft grades. They're saying, hey, you're probably going in the 1st or 2nd round. We would hope. So with that being said, your hope is if he gets drafted in the 1st round, these teams know, hey, look, like he's got all the traits to be extreme. He could be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL if we allow him to develop. So they draft him, they let him sit for a little bit, develop, and then they throw him out there in like year 3, maybe even year 4, like in Aaron Rodgers, and say, all right, now it's yours, go get it. I think he's going to end up being fine. I mean, I know a lot of people are comparing him to Cam Newton. I get that because he's so big. But he's such a better runner than Cam Newton. Like I don't want to say Lamar-esque, but he's almost Lamar-esque running the ball. Like he's so shifty. He's
much closer.
Elusive. Yeah. So that's where I think all these people hyping up Malik Willis last year with what he could do with his legs. Like Anthony Richardson's going to make Malik Willis look not really. I'm semi-joking. You're like Eli Manning running around out there. Like he's so
Yeah.
elusive when he gets into the open
Yeah.
field. Like he'll be able to buy himself time.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that because Cam, like there were a couple QBs, both went to Florida. Cam and Tebow. Maybe my memory isn't remembering Cam now that he's older, but like they were a little more fullbacky in how they ran. I
No,
mean,
they
they were
were. Yeah.
functional. They could get it done. They could get one, especially Cam. Once Cam got going, I think he could get top speed and he could break big runs. But you're right. I mean, there's a play from 2021 with Richardson evades a few people in the pocket, gets to the outside, hurdles a guy, and then once he hits the ground, takes like another acceleration, gets about 5 more yards after the hurdle. I mean, that kind of stuff is pretty wild. That's Lamar Jackson-y. And I do think he's got much more of that like runner capability. And, sometimes the passes look great. He can do that off
Yeah.
platform stuff. He can kind of sling it from multiple arm angles. The problem is, in the NFL, you can't just hit 2 of 5. You have to hit 4 of those 5, and the 5th one has to be real close. Like you can't. It's a little bit of a guessing game, and he'll need to tighten that up. And then the other thing, and we can move on to another player, there's definitely some decision-making issues with him. Like watching games, I mean, you're just like, even with running, it's like, you should have ran there. You should have not ran there. You should have hit the dump off, whatever. I mean, just funky stuff. There was a lot of whispers. I'm not an insider by any stretch, but I have contacts still in Gainesville who know athletes, who talk to people. There's a lot of questions this year as to if he was, trying to save his body a little bit. Was he not full bore running the way that he knows he could have? Would that impact some of those decisions? I don't know. But there was a lot of mystery all year with some head scratching decisions. Was it Napier holding him back? Was it him holding him back? Was it his people in his ear saying, "Hey, don't screw this up for yourself"? I don't know. It's very mysterious. But if he goes 100%. And learns how to play the position, I agree that the upside is obviously mouthwatering.
So with him being gone, we know obviously the off-field stuff that we do not need to get into with John Kitna's son. Obviously, the charges pressed against him. Florida releases him from their program. They've got Jack Miller III there. Not necessarily an inspiring name. A player who's been semi-linked behind the scenes here to them, a quarterback that jumped into the portal today. And it's going to be the first guy that we talk about because he was a CFF darling for you this year. If you had him on your team, he was a guy that none of us thought was actually going to win this job. And that's Austin Reed, who is from Florida, could go back there. It seems like the big teams fighting for him right now are Purdue, or really Jeff Brom, because word is if Jeff Brom does leave and go to Louisville, for those of you who don't know, Scott Satterfield leaves Louisville. He goes to Cincinnati, takes that head coaching job. Jeff Brom is from the Louisville area and I believe played there or has coached there before. So he's got ties to Louisville. He's an alumni of Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
If he goes back there, rumor is Austin Reed may follow him, but he's also being rumored to go to Florida. What are your thoughts here on Reed? Because I know in our Slack channel today, there was a lot of talk that not a lot of guys think he can cut it in the P5 after leaving Western Kentucky.
And this is going to tug on my heartstrings of like wanting this story to materialize all the way to the end result. I loved Bailey Zappi when he was at Houston Baptist. He sets records at Western Kentucky, gets drafted, and then acquitted himself pretty well with a few, start, I guess, in half a game in the NFL. And now you've got Austin Reed, who goes from Division II, wins a national title at Division II, goes to FBS, was the second leading passer in the nation this year at Western Kentucky. Obviously, there's a system there at play. But, I'd love to see him go to a Power 5 and do it again and get drafted. I love that leveling up of these guys who otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to do that. I think it's so great for the sport. I have to say I did not watch a lot of Western Kentucky. I've watched some Austin Reed, especially. I watched some of his, I think it was West Florida tape before he signed with Western Kentucky to be like, what's up with this guy? He does look to have a strong arm. I think he's a little bit of a YOLO guy, whereas Zappi was a very precise, 3-step drop, hit his man, 5-step drop, hit his man on time. Whereas I think Reed's a little more of an improviser. He's a little more athletic, and I think he's a little more YOLO, which is fun. but is that going to cut it when the defense and the margins of the spacing and everything gets way tighter? But I do think he has a stronger arm. Um, would I want him to be our QB1 heading into week 1 going to play Utah? I don't know. I mean, it would be exciting, but do I want that? I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. And frankly, I'm not sure like Napier would be like, "Hey, I'm gonna tie my career trajectory to this guy." Seems high risk. I had a buddy of mine today who was like, "Oh, well, we'll just take him, and he'll be like our QB2. We'll take 2 in the portal." Which, frankly, because of what you mentioned with the depth chart, like we may need to take 2 in the portal and add Rashada. But I don't think he's going somewhere to be the backup. I mean, I think the whole point of this is he wants to go start somewhere. So God, if that's what we do, I'm a little disappointed. I got to say. I mean, I would be rooting for it. It would be fun, but like he grew up about an hour from Gainesville, so I mean, I'm sure. Actually, I saw he went to Austin Reed. Oh no, I was talking about Michael Pratt, which we can talk about him, but he's not in the portal yet. But I think he
Yeah,
could.
I like Michael Pratt. So
Pratt, I
that would be
saw in a
fun to
Gator
watch.
shirt from like his high school days. But Austin Reed grew up about an hour outside of Gainesville and St. Augustine. So I mean, it makes sense coming home, but I can't imagine Florida would be like, "Hey, you're our starter. Come transfer here." And I think he's probably looking for that promise.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I kind of think him following Jeff Brom, whether he goes to Purdue or if Brom does go to Louisville, him following him to Louisville makes a lot of sense because Louisville doesn't have a real starter in waiting. And they're bringing in
No.
Pierce Clarkson, who the recruiting services are split on. I feel like we're
Will they
kind of
bring him
split on
in?
too. Well,
Will
I
they
don't
bring him
know.
in with the coach gone now? I mean,
That is going to be interesting. I know a lot of the reports today where after he took that job, Louisville has already reached out to like Ruben Owens, DeAndre Moore, Pierce Clarkson, said, "Hey, don't leave. Like, just give us a little bit. We're going to get this taken care of and all that." But even then, I don't know that Pierce Clarkson's ready to start right away. Reed's got 1 year of eligibility. If he goes to Purdue, like the one thing I will say is if he gets paired with Brom, I'm still kind of in on him because of what Brom's been able to do, especially on the college side of our fantasy leagues. I mean, so just for you guys who may not know, I mean, he averaged 34.6 points a game last year. That's really good. Wasn't Bailey Zappi level, but that's still pretty damn good. Like that's a starting quarterback for you every
yeah.
single week. So if he can go do that with Brom in the Big Ten with Purdue or Louisville, I'm kind of all in. Let's see what happens with them. We have our own little Western Kentucky insider who does feel like this is
Yeah.
not necessarily a play to get money. We do know some of these guys are going into the portal to try and get a little bit more money out of their schools. This one does feel like a real he's in the portal and trying to move up and move on. So
Yeah, and I mean, I traded for him mid-year in one of our C2C leagues. I actually got him from Felix, C2C's own Felix Sharp. And I was expecting, it was for a playoff run. Didn't end up working out, unfortunately. But the point was just, hey, this year is the year. Anything on the NFL is cake. And so now maybe I get another year out of him. I agree. Power 5 or not, if he's with an offense that's going to throw the ball like 45 times, like Aiden O'Connell averaged, I think under Brom, Aiden O'Connell was good. He was a QB2 at the CFF level in the Big Ten. You're telling me Austin Reed can't be Aiden O'Connell? I mean, Aiden O'Connell's not like special. He's fine. But anyway, if he's in a high volume passing offense, I'll still be in.
all right, let's move on to another guy who absolutely crushed it this year for CFF, running back Carson Steele out of Ball State. I like the move, but I'm also kind of rooting for him. Thor, for those of you who don't know, he's affectionately called that by his teammates because of the long hair. Dude's just absolutely jacked. The picture doesn't do him justice right here. He is absolutely jacked. And as you can see, pretty good stats last year at Ball State. He enters the portal. I know our CFF crew was not a fan of this because of how good he was. Ball State, he was practically their offense. There's a lot of worries that if he goes to a team, maybe like I'm just going to throw this out there, like a UNC or something like that, and he doesn't get kind of the volume he got at Ball State. Are you worried at all about him entering the portal? Is he a guy, on our side of things for fantasy that you might be trying to now sell high on after the year he had and hope someone buys in and hoping that he lands in a bad, he's going to land in a good or bad spot? Do you think him going up to the Power 5 is a bad thing?
I think you have to say it's not going to be the same. It's the MAC. We love Maction, very defense defense-free environment there
Yeah,
in the
defense
MAC.
is optional in the MAC. Yeah.
Defense is
Yeah.
optional in the MAC. And you said he's jacked. I mean, I just looked him up. He's 6'1", 215, and I think that even could be light. Like, he
Yeah.
might be 220, 225. I think he's good. Like, I think he's actually good. Even in the MAC, you don't see guys come around that just, like, basically dominate from the moment they touch the field. I mean, as a true freshman last year, he had a 25% dominator rating. And as a true sophomore this year, 48%, almost 50% dominator rating. Your graphic showed he caught passes, like 42 passes in 2 years. That's a ton. That's a ton for a running back at the college level. So I think he's like actually good. Now, is he Bijan Robinson? No. But you mentioned North Carolina. Like, could he go to North Carolina and be the bell cow? I think maybe so. Like, if he goes to a good offense, and I do think we've talked about this a lot too. For fantasy, I think the offensive environment, the run game is a function of the O line and quarterback not putting you in third and longs and things like that. So I mean, I think it's more of like, what offense is he going to go to? And I think he's good enough to get it done. I really do, even at the Power 5 level. I know we've seen some MAC transfers disappear. We saw Kanata Mumfield go from Akron, disappear at Pitt. We saw who was the reason when Kobe Lewis went from Central Michigan, I believe, to Purdue. Speaking of Purdue, and disappeared. Like, he didn't even play, and he basically got completely lapped by a true freshman, Devin Mockabee. So, you never know if there's injury in there or whatever. But I don't think he's going to disappear because he's big and he did all this really, really young. I think he's actually good.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I actually wrote an article about him in, I want to say it was 2020, 2021. Let's see here, November 8th of 2021. It was his freshman year, as you just mentioned. He was having a really good year. And I wrote an article for Campus to Canton saying, I literally kind of did a play on words with his last name and put Carson, Ball State running back Carson is a steal. And the fact that, like, he was doing all this and nobody was talking about it, I'm with you. Like, he's fairly a decent runner. And I think he was kind of overlooked in the services because he dealt with a really bad hamstring injury his junior year that kind of dropped him down. He wasn't able to play a lot. Then his senior year kind of got ruined by COVID. I believe they only played like 5 games. And we've seen a lot of those guys have just kind of been trapped in like this weird, teams didn't know what to do with them. And I think maybe he was just a guy that was overlooked because of that. I also agree. I think he's a really good running back. Now, you definitely have to be a little bit worried about it because, as you mentioned, and I just brought up with our CFF team, I mean, he was Ball State's offense. So with him moving on, depending on where he goes, chances are he loses that volume. And just like in the NFL, volume is king. So on the CFF side, that matters as well. But I would not personally be selling him unless you get a lot back from him. So I think he could end up being drafted and being a really good running back. But he's a guy we'll definitely be watching on our list here. I was trying to pull up where exactly.
I heard people saying he's not that shifty. This is in our Slack or our Discord. As these names come up, people give their opinions, of course. And, I've heard he's not shifty enough. He's not athletic enough. I don't know, man. I think he, like, is Benny Snell shifty and athletic? No, but he crushed at Kentucky in the SEC. Like, these guys, I've come to really shift a little bit of my thinking on some of these players where I start to see what they're good at and what I think they can do instead of only ever really holding them to, like, are they Bo Jackson or not? And I think he is good. I think he can be a contributor. Someone mentioned, it might've been you actually, like, he's going to probably have 2 years wherever he goes. I don't think he's going to be a one and done at the next level. Certainly if he goes G5 still, he'll be 2 years in G5. If he goes to P5, I think he still might be 2 years. So you're going to get 2 years out of college production. And I think bell cow, it might have been by necessity for Ball State, but it also might have been like he can do it all. I don't know about his pass blocking, but like he's obviously heavy. 28 receptions this year in 12 games. I mean, that's more than 2 a game. There's not a lot of running backs. You can count on probably one hand that catch more than 2 passes a game at the college level, like Deuce Vaughn and, maybe a handful of other guys. So that's quite a bit of receiving.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big difference for anybody, watching this that just pays attention to the NFL and like, oh, well, I see Alvin Kamara catch 5 passes a game. Much different on the college level. It is not as pass-centric to these running backs. So having multiple catches a game like that is fairly impressive for Carson Steele. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think he has to be elusive. He produces the way he is. He's just one of those guys who's a tough, hard runner. Like, that doesn't mean he can't succeed where he's at, wherever he lands, whether it is P5 or if he stakes in the G5 and onto the NFL if he goes that route.
One more thing I just was going to say, because when these guys go to the NFL, we have all this scrutiny and everyone's in dynasty talking about market shares and different things like that. I don't know if people are tracking that in a sophomore year in the MAC. However, just to say, once this guy got really the microscope put on him, you'd see that 29 receptions actually is over 10% of a reception share at Ball State because they didn't throw it a ton. So, like, he had, 10% is a great number. Like, a guy who's like, if we're looking at like a dynasty thing and we're going through all these players, he would pop for people because he would have this huge receiving share, bell cow workload. People would be on him. And I'm sure as like their sleeper if this was like a senior situation.
Yeah, and I was trying to pull up. So his ADOT, though, is not great. He's doing most of this behind the line of scrimmage. It's literally like negative 6. So
okay, that's bad.
0.6. So yeah,
0.6.
he's doing
okay.
it. Yeah, 0.6. Yeah, 0.6. So he's doing it all behind the line of scrimmage, pretty much. So it's not like he's running down the field to catch these passes.
That's fair. Well, Noah would tell us, because I think Noah, when he does his really detailed breakdowns, he talks about the kind of passes they're catching. So that does matter.
Yeah, I don't remember if he did Carson Steele or not. I asked him to do him, and I think he was going to at one point, but then I don't know if he did or not. I'll have to go back and look through.
Actually, I'm pretty sure he did.
Did he?
And he came away like cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That would have been after his freshman year. His sophomore year is even better, so we'll see.
Yeah. Another G5 guy who has entered the portal, another player who is very successful this year as well, Dante Cephas, wide receiver out of Kent State. And our Slack kind of had the same reaction to him entering as they did Carson Steele. I mean, he averaged 15.73 points a game. Now, Colin Schley was injured a lot toward the back end of the year. They were playing their backup and even third-string quarterback at times. Dante Cephas, are you kind of excited at all about him possibly going to the P5? Is he kind of a fade for you now on the fantasy side of things with him leaving Kent State?
Yeah, so I think receivers are a little bit harder because I think they can get truly lost in the shuffle, whereas a running back comes in, he's probably going to be like, hey, I'm your guy. A receiver can just get lost in the shuffle. The other thing that bothers me about Cephas is this year, I know he was injured. He didn't play all 12 games and the quarterback situation, but he was outplayed by another guy. Now, Devontae Walker, I think is who it was, had a much better season, played all the games, and is older, I believe. I think I know he's like a JUCO or something, so I think he might be a little older than Cephas. But I'd be a little concerned he goes somewhere and is like a Tinsley last year, where Tinsley went from Western Kentucky to Penn State, and then he kind of got lost behind, Parker Washington, some other guys. I don't think he led Penn State in any receiving. He was kind of just like a guy. So I would be a little worried about that.
Yeah, I am with you as well. You'd like him to stay at Kent State if possible. We'll see. I don't know that this is necessarily him entering the portal to try and get more money from Kent State. I don't know that Kent State's NIL collective is really shelling out any money. I want to skip around a little bit here compared to some of the players who have entered and talk about a player who is deciding to come back to school. And I think this threw a lot of us off in Kayshon Boutte. He was decided to return to LSU. Let's just be honest here. Beginning of the season, he looked almost disinterested in playing football. There's a lot of stuff between him and Brian Kelly. And at one point, Brian Kelly admitted he didn't even know the kid's name. A lot of talks that he was going to enter the transfer portal. He doesn't. Now he's coming back to school. I don't know if this really puts a big effect on the transfer portal for LSU because it doesn't sound like he's going in. He sounds like he's staying there. Malik Neighbors had a good year. Looks like Garrett Nussmeier might be able to beat out Jaden Daniels for that starting job. I thought he looked pretty good at times in that Georgia SEC championship. Granted, Georgia, was up fairly well at that point, so they probably weren't caring too much. But your kind of thoughts on him coming back to school?
My first thought was I was actually sad about all my CFF. I have a few, shares in C2C, and I'm like, well, I'm happy he's coming back for another year, but I'm not sure the LSU offense makes him an amazing start on the college side. And then, I'm a little bit of a senior declared zealot where I'm like, well, he's just done. I mean, he's tanked. I don't think that's fair. I don't know. In the NIL era, maybe they're paying him something, and so it's not quite the same as like getting a bad draft grade. Maybe it was a second round grade, and LSU is going to pay him in 1 year like a first rounder. I don't know. You really don't know what's happening behind the scenes. But I can imagine that the NFL might have said, hey, you have a second round grade, not on talent alone, but like I was a little worried he'd slip because of whatever the hell was happening in the off season, in the beginning of the year. I agree with you. He looked out. He looked out of it, checked out, mentally checked out. I thought he could be a guy that just like, mid-season, just like, I'm done. I'm preparing for the draft. I don't know if someone gave him the advice of like, hey, you need to come back and like show you're a team player or something. Like I could see that potentially was an advice. The talent, I've loved him since he was a freshman. I mean, he was my wide receiver 1 in C2C for the last 2 years. And now I really don't know what to do. I mean, I do not like, I'm such a senior declare. Like if you're a senior, it automatically bumps you to like wide receiver 2 ceiling in the NFL, because that's how the data really plays out. He could be a weird case. I mean, I know we want to make exceptions, but look at Devonta Smith. Everyone was like, Devonta Smith, he's going to break the mold. He's a wide receiver too on his own team. I mean, the senior declare seems to really matter. And so I'm bummed. I'm kind of bummed, but maybe he'll be the one exception that we see.
Yeah, I mean, I could really see this being a Chris Olave type thing. For a lot of people thought that Chris Olave was getting first-round draft capital grades last year, and from what I was told, he wasn't. He was being told he was probably a day 2 pick, like a round 2, maybe even early round 3 pick, and he's like, no, I'm going to come back to school and prove everybody wrong, and he did that. Say what you want, he did not have as good a year as he did before. He still got first-round draft capital. Maybe that's what Butte is looking at here. He's like, you know what? I can come back to school. I can get a little bit more money, and I'll prove to everybody how good I am and go into the draft in 24 and be a first-round pick. I don't know if you've seen this. I just saw this happen about 20 minutes ago, right as we were going live here. JoJo Earl has entered the transfer portal. Alabama is losing a ton of talent here. They've already lost Trey Sanders. They just lost, I believe, 2 offensive linemen as well. I saw a linebacker, a cornerback,
no,
5 offensive.
5 right now. Goodness. Only 1 starter or something, but 5 of
still, their depth is getting hit there. And now JoJo Earl and Christian Leary have both entered the transfer portal, fairly highly rated freshmen for us. Unfortunately, neither one has ever really been able to separate themselves. It's really just been Ja'Cory Brooks, and you could argue how good Ja'Cory Brooks has really been for them. Has kind of had these moments in games, but never truly really broken out. What are we doing here with these guys? And what are we doing with Alabama? I mean, I know they're getting Malik Benson, but it's not like this recruiting class is loaded outside of Jalen Hale. Like, I mean, Cole Adams is probably not good. I mean, I want to say he's not good. He's, but he's not Ja'Cory Brooks.
Bolden-esque.
Yeah, he's not. Trayshawn Holden's gone too. Like, what is going on with Alabama?
Yeah, the more Alabama that I see, I am a little bit like, is there something under the surface that we're like, are there some cracks in the armor here? It is a little weird. It's a lot of guys. Yeah, maybe it's depth pieces, but still that is going to matter eventually. And maybe Alabama reloads in the portal. They're on their own right. I'm not sure, but it is interesting. Now, in terms of the 2 players you mentioned, Leary and Earl, Leary, something weird. I mean, I have a friend actually who has wanted Leary to transfer for 2 years and come to Florida. And after the first year, I was like, okay, I'm still in. After this year, I'm like, I'm out. I mean, he hasn't done anything. Look at that. 3 for 10 in 2 seasons. He did get a touchdown in year 1, which he avoided a year 1 0 because of that touchdown. But otherwise, I mean, cannot get on the field. The receivers have definitely been lacking in this year, and definitely lacking a deep threat. That's what he's supposed to be. So you've got Isaiah Bond out there. You've got true freshmen out there. He is not touching the field. I don't know. I don't know if it's something like, someone in our Slack, I think it's one of our contributors who, we've got everyone with such great perspectives, and he's like, what happens is coaches want to reward players that they see working hard. Coaches want to reward players that they see doing the work in practice, doing the work in the film room, all this sort of thing. And so I think you get to a point where, like, is Leary so bad talent-wise they don't want to put him on the field? And I think that's not true. I think he's got talent. Something's up where the coaches don't even want to reward him with playing time. When they're throwing other guys in there, he's not on the list. So I don't know. I don't know what, these is totally hypothetical, but like something is weird about the complete and utter lack of use by Christian Leary. However, JoJo Earl, I would be very in on. I think any team should be very excited about JoJo Earl. He was not a year one zero. He caught 12 passes for over 100 yards. He also returned punts as a true freshman. Which is, at Alabama, that's great. They use him on special teams. I mean, that's fantastic. This year, I don't know. People thought he would break out. Kobe Prentice kind of started in his role as a true freshman, so that was kind of weird in terms of why isn't JoJo Earl getting in there. But wasn't he injured with a foot injury? I feel like he had a foot. Okay, so he was injured. I mean, there's a narrative here where you say JoJo Earl just never quite got clicking, but he was used and put on the field as a true freshman, and he did catch I want to say it was 200 yards. He was 12 for 155 and 2 touchdowns this year. He's far from a zero in his first 2 years. I'd be interested. I think really any Power 5 team should be very interested. And I bet you he goes to a high level Power 5 team.
Yeah, I would imagine both do. I think that ring pedigree is still going to matter. And let's just be honest, the fact that they are coming from Alabama is likely going to matter as well. I think that is going to be a good selling point to teams who are interested in trying to land one of these guys and getting one of them. It's just weird to see this much talent leaving Alabama, especially after the year they just had too. There's been a lot of rumors over the past couple months that maybe Nick Saban's kind of coming to an end. Is there something going on in that locker room? Bryce Young's gone. I mean, that's another thing we haven't even had a chance to talk about is what are they going to do with that quarterback? We don't know if Bryce Young's even going to play in the bowl game right now. So if he doesn't, you're looking at a possibility. I mean, they're playing Kansas State, which I think is probably going to be, I don't want to say an easy matchup for them.
No, I think Kansas State's live, bro.
Oh, okay. I like it.
They are going to bring – this is Kansas State's like Super Bowl of Super Bowls. And we'll talk about this in bowl previews and betting previews and all that as we go on. But I think Kansas State's going to bring it, and I think Alabama's going to be like, eh.
Hey, I'm all for it. The big thing is going to be, is it going to be Jalen Milroe? Do we see Ty Simpson in that game? Like, there's a lot of questions. We talked last year about there being a lot of questions around this Alabama team. I feel like there's even more going into the 2023 season, which is insane to think about. Again, with Nick Saban being the guy at the helm there.
It is wild. I saw actually on my Twitter feed, at least, I don't know if it's trending for everybody, but maybe my curated feed, Ty Simpson was trending today for me. I clicked on some tweets. I guess there's a whole lot of chatter about who will start the bowl game. Mm-hmm. And plenty of people were in there saying, like, Ty Simpson's the truth. I saw some stuff that said Ty Simpson from yesterday. I saw stuff from December 2nd that said Ty Simpson's going to test the transfer portal. I mean, who knows? Alabama seems to be, you don't want to say they're falling apart because they could rally and like next year we just forget what we were worried about. But like right now, today, it's a little bit shaky. It's shakier than it's been in a while.
Yeah, I'm going to be very intrigued to see. I hope Ty Simpson doesn't enter, but if he does, I mean, that's probably going to be the top name for most schools out there. 2 quarterbacks who've decided to stay. And I want to touch on this one first. Just announced, I don't think it's going to change much for them. Jordan Travis. He is coming back to Florida State. Had a really good year this year, and I think would have been even better had he not suffered that ankle injury earlier on in the year. I think it's a good move for him, good move for Florida State. Mike Norvell has really seemed to kind of turn around the Seminoles here. I think they're going to be in for a pretty good season. Any thoughts on him before we talk about I don't say major one, but a one that we could see some transfer portal moves come after that?
Yeah, I mean, is Jordan Travis the only ACC quarterback who's staying at his own school? It seems that way.
It feels like it. Really
I don't know how he finished the college fantasy scoring. I think he was probably pretty good. I mean, I think he was startable, certainly as a QB2 on a lot of weeks. Tremendous rushing upside. It pains me to say this, but, if my FSU friends are watching, I got to give it to him. The guy improved. He looked good. He was a much better passer than he has been. I mean, he's your classic, like, took 4 years, but he developed and became a well-rounded quarterback that you can count on to win games, and that's what he is now. And so, that'll be good for FSU for one more year, because I will get my jab in that Norvell hasn't recruited a damn QB to FSU. So if they don't have Travis, that they're in trouble. So at least he gets one more year to figure it out at QB.
Yeah, I mean, he showed off some pretty good rushing display as well in that game against Florida, which was, I mean, it's an impressive game from both him and Richardson
like
in that
magic.
one.
I mean, magic stuff back there, where if Lamar Jackson did it, it'd be viral and everyone would be talking about it.
So Jordan Travis finished with 28.81 points a game, which puts him there at QB 31. So roughly a high-end QB 3. But again, he missed multiple games because of the ankle injury. And even when he came back, he was not running that much like he was earlier in the season, as we saw late at the end of the season as well. A quarterback who was a QB1, Michael Penix. This one kind of surprised me a little bit with him announcing coming back to Washington, as there was a lot of talk like he could vault up into that QB3 territory. He comes back to Washington. Big thing for Washington, big for the Pac-12, but more interesting, in my opinion, for a player who was the number one quarterback in his class, a legacy of Washington. Do you think we see Sam Heward finally leave Washington and try to do something? Because, I mean, we've not even seen this kid outside of one game in his freshman season, I believe in the Apple Cup, where he did not play well. Dude's been buried on that depth chart, and now Michael Penix comes back. Like, he's got to enter the transfer portal. If you have him on your roster, is it just time to dump him?
It's easy for me to answer because I was never a huge Sam Heward fan, but I think even if you were, I think you were.
I liked him a lot.
It's just there's so few stories where guys do not even see the field. Now, and granted, if he transfers, maybe he sees the field in year 3. But as it stands right now, Washington is making decisions to say, we do not want this guy on the field for 3 years. That's not great, Bob. So I think that's, he obviously, there's something that's not there. I think he should go at this point. I mean, you're talking G5 probably, and try to rehab that, career, and maybe you transfer back as a grad transfer or something like that to P5. But I always had some questions about arm strength, and so I wonder if that's just panned out and he just maybe doesn't have it. But you're right about the legacy, like 2 or 3 time legacy, brothers, cousins, uncles, at UW. So maybe he'll just stick it out, but.
Maybe
tough. I would just on my roster, he'd be a first bubble guy.
Yeah, that is insane to me if he does stick it out. I mean, it's the first day, so he could end up going in. Another one in the Pac-12 I just want to mention really quick. We don't have any confirmation yet, but Bo Nix has at least said he's going to play in Oregon's bowl game. They're playing North Carolina, probably one of the better bowl games we are going to get this bowl season. If Bo Nix decides to come back, do you think we see Ty Thompson enter the transfer portal, who's kind of been in the same situation? Now, he's not a legacy for Oregon, but again, same thing. Has been not really seen him in 3 years. Thought he was going to compete for this job. Didn't really seem like he did. Probably his best chances to now get out of there. I don't know that he's going to be the bridge for Dante Moore, especially if Bo Nix does come back and stay one more season.
No, he's not a bridge. Because Dante Moore comes this year, Bo Nix's potential last season, and then Dante Moore is a sophomore. I don't think there's a bridge there. I think if Dante Moore is any good, he's the starter as a sophomore. So, I mean, that's Ty Thompson probably does portal. I think he in limited time this year, he still didn't look ready. Did he start a game? I know he came in for a few series. Did he start a whole game?
He did not. He came in the, what was it?
It was a big game.
It was the Washington game. Right at the end, Bo Nix got hurt, the injury that he ended up dealing with toward the end of the season. And for whatever reason, they decided to go for it on 4th down. And I believe it was had Ty Thompson try and run the ball without Bo Nix there. They handed it to the running back. I don't remember. But, yeah, he was in there for a couple of drives toward the end of the game when they ended up losing to Washington.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the writing's on the wall for him as well.
Yeah. All right, let's look at some of these other players who have entered. And I'm going to start with one who entered, and then we already have his landing spot, and that is Phil Jurkovec. he's kind of been a guy who's been up and down draft boards. People thought maybe he could come out this year after having a good year at Boston College. Definitely did not look the same as he did to start the season last year. Ends up getting injured, sits out, I believe, the last 4 games of the season. Now he's transferring to Pitt, which Keaton Slovis is now then on the move. I don't know that I love this landing spot for fantasy. I don't know if this really helps him for draft capital. I think it's just kind of done with Jurkovic. Is that kind of your thoughts as well?
Yeah, I think it's a big shrug emoji here. I think it is wild, though. A guy who transferred once, went to Boston College, capitalized on his opportunity, looked real good. Some people were thinking day two. I swear I saw, I don't know who it was. I swear I saw one mock draft with him late first round at some point in last off season. Who then comes back, bad season. Now we're transferring again. He's going to play for 3 colleges in his career. Like, it's just wild, like what the transfer portal has allowed to happen. And I just think when we've got this much movement in a player, it's just something's wrong there. And I think watching him play, I've never been a huge fan. I wanted to believe because he's got some mobility. I think he's a little bit of like your destitute man's maybe Will Levis, honestly. Like, he's kind of that like mobile-ish, but the stats aren't there. But like, you watch him and like he's kind of mobile, but he doesn't actually put up really, really good stats. And then, watching him throw, his motions a little bit loopy and long. He just doesn't seem to be one of those like athletic type guys, and he's also not like a super great pocket passer either. So it's just honestly he's a tweener of styles is the best way I could
Yeah.
maybe describe it. And so I've never been a huge fan, and I don't see him really doing much at Pittsburgh to up his draft capital. So
Yeah, I think they're going to, I imagine they're going to continue to rely on the running game there. So I don't know that he's going to do much there either. It might, unfortunately, kind of be done for him. Hudson Card enters the transfer portal out of Texas. Obviously, Quinn Ewers starts the year there. Did not look fantastic. So you thought maybe Hudson Card 6th round tries to battle one more year, but he does not. You got Arch coming in. I guess he sees the writing on the wall. He ends up jumping in the transfer portal. Do you see a logical fit here for Card? I mean, he actually looked pretty good in that Alabama game before injuring his ankle. I thought he looked at least a little bit better this year when he played compared to last year. I think he could actually be a fairly intriguing fit depending on where he goes.
when I first saw it, I was like, Hudson Card, who cares? The more I looked at Hudson Card and kind of some of his numbers and thinking through possibilities, I was like, you know what? I could see this being like a sneaky, solid option for a team. He's never been able to be the guy, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was always battling somebody. He battled Casey Thompson. He battled now this year was Quinn Ewers. He's never just been handed the keys. He's never won the keys either. But
Yeah.
like, I think that's I could see him going somewhere with like, hey, you're our guy, and he just blossoms. I mean, he's interesting. He's athletic. I think he's like, got some tools. And this year, you're right, he was good. He was actually good. I mean, almost 70% completion on 100 attempts, 928 yards, 8.6 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns is not that many. Given his attempts, I guess that's not too bad. 6 touchdowns, one pick, and then 17 for 46 on the ground. So I mean, completing 70% of your passes with a near 9% yards per attempt is pretty good. I look at those 2 metrics as a quick glance of like what kind of a quarterback it is. Those were all career highs. I would be intrigued, especially if he goes G5. Like, if he goes G5, he could be like awesome, like kind of awesome. Like Conference USA, like go to UTSA and take over for Frank Harris or something like that. But we'll see. I think he probably will get P5 looks though.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If he can go G5 route, I think he'd be phenomenal for you in fantasy. I don't know that that's what he wants to do. He probably wants to stick around in the P5, converted wide receiver. And like we said, played better this year when he had the chance. But I think, if he does go P5, I wouldn't expect it to be a massive, like, high-end school, but you'd like to see G5 for the fantasy purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantasy purposes, G5 all in. Like we're talking big-time target in drafts next year.
DJ.
Ugh.
Finally does it. Looks like, we saw it. that offense looked completely different with Cade Klubnik out there in the ACC championship game against North Carolina. DJ officially enters the portal. Obviously, a lot of rumors about him possibly going back to the West Coast somewhere in California. But talks about Oregon, Arizona State. The logical fits to me seem to be Arizona State and UCLA. Is there somewhere that you'd like to see him go? Is there any hope that he can return back to this high end, 5-star player he was coming out of high school?
Yeah, I think of those choices. I mean, I agree with you. I think Oregon was on some people's lists, but if Nix is coming back, obviously not. Um, I think what Dillingham just did with a guy like Bo Nix, where he must have, I don't know if he simplified the offense. I mean, Bo Nix looked like he could not make a decision to save his life at Auburn, and now he's coming and his completion percentage like skyrocketed, yards per attempt, everything. He was great. He was great, literally great. DJU's a different player. He's not quite as acrobatic and athletic back there, but he can run. When I watch DJU, I get the sense like he's slow to process. It seems like everything is slow, from how he scans the field to his literal motion, which looks like it takes 10 years. I mean, it's not as slow and wind up as Tim Tebow, but it's like that, where it's just like, oh, he takes it all the way back and then he throws it. And it's just like, really feels like everything takes a while with him. And it seemed like Dillingham got nixed for the game to slow down and he could play faster. And so maybe Dillingham could get the game to slow down and DJU to play faster. And that would be obviously great. And so Dillingham, what he did with the Knicks would give me some hope at Arizona State if he went back there. I think going to the West Coast makes a lot of sense. I've seen some people on Twitter like, oh my gosh, the bidding wars for DJU. I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, I think someone's going to be happy to add him to their quarterback room just because I'm sure he's better than a lot of quarterbacks that would be starting. But I don't think it's going to be like a frenzy. He's a limited guy right now. Unless something unlocks, he's a limited quarterback.
Yeah, that's why I would love for him to go to Arizona State, because of everything you just mentioned with Dillingham and Bo Nix. They don't have anybody there really on the roster. I believe the player who was starting for them toward the end of the year, the last name Borgo, I believe he just entered the transfer portal earlier today too. So like he's probably gone. They are bringing in Israel Carter, who I think will stay committed to them. Dillingham was actually one who committed him and gave him an offer to Oregon, which I don't think any of us thought he was going to go there with Dante Moore. Dante Moore is clearly one of the better prospects in this class. Carter is an intriguing prospect. Doesn't really have a great arm, but what he can do with his legs and everything is intriguing. But he's not going to be ready to start right now. So maybe you get a DJU to come in there for year one, maybe even 2 years, and Dillingham's able to kind of rebuild that image, as you mentioned, with Nix there. I think it'd be a very intriguing option for DJU if that is what he decides. Last year, 50% of the FBS quarterbacks were transfers. Wow. That's how big of a deal transfer quarterbacks were last year. There's another quarterback who has entered the transfer portal that we were all high on. In fact, there were some people at C2C debating him being the starting quarterback at UNC over Drake May, which seems crazy now with how good Drake May was. But Jacoby Criswell really hasn't gotten much of a shot here, but we believe in the talent. He enters the transfer portal. Your thoughts on him? Is there any logical fit you see? Do you think, I personally think regardless of where he goes, he's going to be a starter, and I think he can be a good starter for you on the CFF side of things wherever he goes.
Yeah, I mean, Criswell's a guy, I kind of become known a little bit for my my sleeper articles every year with prospects. I think he was still a 4-star, but there was not many people talking about Criswell when he signed with UNC out of Arkansas, but he was like the Gatorade Player of the Year in Arkansas. He was very, very good in high school, and he went to UNC, and at the time, Sam Howell was there, and I think everyone's like, well, it's going to be at least 2 years, whatever. So I think, I mean, the talent's there. He's a dual threat. Love that for fantasy, of course. And the one thing that's bothering me now is like there's already a crystal ball for him to go to Arkansas.
Yeah.
What's that? I mean, I know that's his home state, but like, I mean, you're transferring to go sit behind KJ Jefferson. He's not going to beat out KJ Jefferson. And there's no indication that Jefferson's going to be elsewhere, but maybe that signals that he is going to declare for the NFL or something like that. But wherever he goes, I want him to start, obviously, and I would be pretty in if he was like a locked and loaded starter, whether that's Arkansas or Arkansas State. I mean, I don't care. Like anywhere in between, I think dual threat guys that can throw the football and probably score 10 to 15 on the ground because he's a big, huge guy too. Like they're gonna use him as like a fullback near the goal line. So very intriguing from Criswell, and I just hope he goes somewhere where he starts.
Yeah, the Arkansas one was confusing to me as well because he's only got 2 years left of eligibility. So if he's going there, you're sitting a year probably behind KJ Jefferson. You only get 1 year of starting. If he has any, I don't know that he's an NFL guy, but if that's your goal, why are you going somewhere where you're likely going to have to sit a year and then you're only going to get 1 year of playing time in an offense that I'm not sure is really going to be great into highlighting certain parts of your game. So it's going to be intriguing. Maybe it is more of, as you just mentioned, from there. Maybe he just wants to go back home. We do see that does play a big part on some of these kids' decisions. A couple other quarterbacks I want to touch on. We'll touch on a couple skill players before we get out of here. Cade McNamara. And I know this is not like a sexy landing spot. Leaves Michigan, goes to Iowa. We don't really care, right? But we got to just bring it up. Like, it's not going to matter for fantasy. I mean, he was okay for Michigan last year. Great game manager. It's probably going to be better than the quarterbacks Iowa had last year. This year. But I don't think it's going to change anything for us on the fantasy side of things.
Yeah, no comment. We can move on. I mean, it's Iowa, so he will be better than Petrus. Like maybe he could get them to a Big Ten title game and not lose to Nebraska, but otherwise for fantasy, completely irrelevant.
But not not a high bar when you say he's going to be better this week.
Right.
This is not a high bar to jump over. This one is an intriguing one for me because, and I don't remember where you were exactly on him, but I know there was 3 of us in the freshman guide last year who were very high on this player. I believe he was in our top 5. Nick Evers. Goes to Oklahoma. Thought maybe he'd have a chance to battle it out with Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel gets hurt. And Oklahoma did not want to use him so much that they used the Wildcat for most of the Texas game. We had our own Nate Marchese, who one of our CFF guys here, extremely smart Oklahoma insider, told us that Nick Evers just was not impressing at all through spring, summer, everything. The talent's there, though. Is there a place you'd like to see him transfer? And if he does transfer to a place where he gets a shot to start, are you back in on him? Because like I said, I don't remember where you were. He was QB4 for me, I believe, QB4 or 5. It was him and Klubnik right there for me. Like, would you be willing to give Evers a shot if he's going somewhere that he could start?
Oh, absolutely willing to give him a shot. He was not as high as what you're mentioning for me on my list. I think I originally liked him. I think on first watch, if I remember, his story for me was like, looked very accurate. I thought he had a quick release. I look at motion a lot at the high school level to really see, is this going to, translate to be able to make quick decisions? He looked like that. I think the more I looked at him, the more I realized the arm strength was not quite there. I mean, it's just a little bit loopy on the passes, not a lot of zip, not a lot of evidence of like firing it to the hash, outside. But he's got some dual threat in him. He can move around. He's athletic. And I liked all those things. So I think I looked at him the other day and what my grades were back when I graded him specifically. And he kind of just got like middle to middle good for everything, like 3.5 out of 5 or 3 or 3.5, like for almost every category. So he's just like good, above average, but not amazing in any one category. I wrote an article for Mojo, the Mojo market, kind of player stock market this week, actually, that said go buy Nick Evers. His stock right now is basically down there with it's below like Jaden DeLar, it's below Keaton Slovis. I think if he goes to a Power 5 team, like in the, not Pittsburgh, but like in that Pittsburgh level where you're like a quality P5 team, but not really threatening too hard for a New Year's Six bowl, but not at the bottom of your list, like Maryland, Pittsburgh, places like that. I think he could go somewhere in that realm and start pretty quickly. And I'd be interested in, I think he could put up some numbers. I mean, I don't know about NFL talent, but I think he can do something where just to put it in terms of value, I think his like Mojo stock could rise. And I also think he could be useful, certainly on the college side. And you never know if he develops, we could be talking about an NFL guy.
Yeah, he's someone, like I said, I was very high on. I'd like to see him go somewhere where he could possibly start because I think he would be an intriguing player. Played at Flower Mound here in Texas, 6A, some of the best competition that you can play. I felt like he played really well, especially with having no one around him. Typically, you look at these Texas high school quarterbacks, they've got, some wide receiver, 4 or 5 star
Hmm.
wide receiver with them, or running back. He didn't have that at Flower Mound and still played really well, got him into the playoffs. So I'm hoping he goes somewhere to start. LJ Johnson, really quick, we'll touch on just a couple players. Never really seemed to work out for him at Texas A&M. Pretty quickly announced he was entering the portal once all the talk started. Was that kind of in that he was in the Travion Henderson class where he really didn't love anybody outside of Henderson, kind of like
Yeah.
Shipley.
Yeah.
I don't know if he even goes somewhere. He's a guy that I'm really hoping to jump back in on. Do you feel differently about that?
No, I don't. I never really thought LJ Johnson was super impressive. I think he reminded me of. I was also not super impressed with Isaiah Spiller. I think he's like that type. I mean, just a little bit of like a quality running back, but no standout traits. Not super, sudden. And I just think those guys get swallowed up eventually. So, I don't think he's that big. Like he's not 220, 230. I mean, he's like
Nah, he's like,
205.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think he's listed at 200. So
So
yeah,
he
he's
just
he's he's
he
light.
just like doesn't have anything that you can even tell yourself a story on, and then not even being able to see the field, especially this year. Like Devin Achane is great, but he's like 180 pounds. Like you'd think they would have wanted a bigger back if someone was good enough, and the fact that he didn't even see the field this year is pretty concerning. I think he's a G5 guy actually.
Yeah, I am with you on that. I got to touch on my guy Ray Davis really quick. I
Yeah.
really hoped he was going to go into the NFL draft. He does not. Enters the transfer portal again. There's a lot of rumors that he might be going to Kentucky. I actually
Huh.
kind of like that landing spot for him. I don't think he's any worse than a Chris Rodriguez, so he can probably put up some fantasy points for you. I mean, he averaged over 16 points of fantasy. He was a flex starter for you for
Hmm.
most of the season. Really good with a Vanderbilt team that was not winning a lot of games. So if he is able to go to a place like Kentucky, I think he's fantasy worthy. But I do think the fact that he's going back into the transfer portal to another team probably tells you he did not get good draft grades. I thought maybe he could be a 4th or 5th round pick. I feel like they're probably telling me he's not even going to get drafted. So
UDFA at
that,
this point,
yeah,
yeah.
that part kind of sucks. But I'm still holding on to him if you got him for your CFF. If you get him for one more year, like I said, if he does go to Kentucky, I think that could be a really good landing spot for him. Probably the most intriguing name we've seen outside of a couple of the Alabama guys was one of the first names we saw enter the transfer portal. I know Felix is really high on this guy. Missouri wide receiver Dominic Lovett. Now he's getting a lot of love from Alabama, who we've now seen is like lost half of their wide receiver
Yeah.
core as it is, but also Tennessee, which I think
Mm.
would be a really good landing spot for them. They lose Jimmy Callaway, Jalen Hyatt going into the NFL. If he were, which school would you prefer him go to for your fantasies? I mean, realistically, while Missouri was not a good team this year, we were all kind of focused on Luther Burden because we were so
Hmm.
hopeful to see him. Dominic Lovett was the best wide receiver that Missouri had. And I think if he goes Alabama or Tennessee, both those landing spots could be really good for his fantasy upside, at least next season.
Yeah, and if you had to tell me which one would I pick right now, I'd say Tennessee. We know that offense is going to be explosive and deep and vertical. We don't really know what Alabama's receivers here, nobody was good. Like you couldn't start one receiver on their team this year, and they still were 10-2, yada yada yada. But like, and now Bryce Young's going to be gone. I don't know what to expect from Alabama. Will they just revamp themselves and become like ground and pound? I don't really know. So between those two, for fantasy, I'd say I want him on Tennessee. Um, and Luther Burden looked great as well. But you're right. Dominic Lovett was the number one receiver on that team in all categories, really. Um, and I have a few names actually. I don't know if you were going to get to everybody, but I think there's still some other
Yeah,
really
go ahead. Who you
great
got?
names here. Dorian Singer from Arizona has announced that he's going to the transfer portal, and we were already talking in our Slack thinking he might go to USC. Would you
USC.
like that? I mean, you'd
Yeah,
love
that'd
that,
be
right?
yeah, oh yeah, that'd be massive. I think Mario Williams has really been kind of disappointing. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
the one thing I don't think it'll matter necessarily with him going there, but I really kind of hope they wouldn't bring anybody into the transfer portal because that wide receiver room is fairly light right now. And I'd love to be able to see like Zachariah Branch and Mekhi Lemon get on the
Right
field
away.
as freshmen
Yes.
right away with Caleb. Like that would be so great to see that. And then Malachi steps in the next year. But I don't. Dorian Singer comes in. Like, I still think Branch still has a shot to get on there. I would imagine Singer's going to be out on the outside like he is
Yeah.
right now. So it probably hurts Lemon more than it does Branch. But I think it would be a great landing spot for them. I mean, they're clearly want to get back to where they were this year, trying to make the playoffs. So it would be a great fit for him. And I think Caleb getting a more reliable target, because whatever happened with Mario, injury, whatever it was, he just really seemed to fade to the back end of the season.
And then Singer was a 2021 freshman, so he's going into his third year next year. I do find it interesting too. I go back and I look at the profiles of these guys when, like, he was a little bit of a surprise player this year at Arizona, put up some great numbers. He was listed as a safety on 24/7. These guys that make the transition from a defensive player and then they show up on campus and they want to play him as a wide receiver or whatever. Like, to me, those stories are very interesting. Like, maybe that's why he was under recruited. Maybe that's why it took him a year, because his second year looks fantastic. I guess in terms of like projecting upward and outward, like, that's the story where I'm like, okay, there's a real reason why it maybe took 2 years. And like, this
Yeah.
guy could be a legit NFL guy all of a sudden, because he was like a safety as a prospect. To me, that stuff kind of matters when you're like, why was he under recruited? Why did he go to Arizona? Why did it take a year? Well, that answers some of your questions. Um, and then we've got, for fantasy, Allie Jennings. He was ridiculous this year for Old Dominion. Like 50-60% of their passing offense went to Allie Jennings. And I think he would probably go somewhere. I mean, he was a P5 recruit. He went to West
Yeah.
Virginia. It wasn't like he just went to Old Dominion out of the gate. And so I think he could be a guy to keep an eye on depending on landing spot. And then I'm just going to throw out my favorite. I think one of my favorite guys in this who entered the portal today is Ryan O'Keefe out of UCF. He's smaller. He's like 5'10", maybe 175, and that might be generous. But he's out of Texas when he was in high school. He went to UCF. He just finished his fourth year. His last 2 years have been very good. He had I think a pretty high market share last year. It dwindled a little bit this year. But what I like about him, he's just a great weapon. He does a little receiving. He does a little running. He does punt returns, kick returns. Like, he just is great, and he's very, very fast. I think wherever he goes, if he goes to, like, look at what UCF did. Was this Malzahn's second year, right? So his last 2 years were both Malzahn.
Yes. Yeah.
And Malzahn wants to run the ball. We had John Reese Plumlee this year. I guess it was Gabriel last year, but he got injured. And there was the true freshman Mikey Keene, who turned out to be kind of a good passer, but like, he was a true freshman and he kind of looked bad last year. And then this year he backed up Plumlee, who is mostly a runner. If he goes somewhere, like, let's just say Ryan O'Keefe goes to SMU. I mean, holy cow. I am way, way in on Ryan O'Keefe on the college fantasy side for next year. If he goes somewhere, they want to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game, where they use the receiving game. They use their receivers to stretch the defense, and they have a quarterback who can deliver the ball. I think Ryan O'Keefe could be like excellent next year, at least on the college fantasy side. You never know. He could find his way as a returner or something in the NFL. I mean, I think there will be a spot for him on a roster, but he's smaller, but I think he's just dynamic. I mean, I love guys that just do it all.
Yeah. Do you have any other sleepers you want to mention really quick, or because there's a guy that I can bring up?
Well, I'll make one more. Actually, I have two more, but we can go back and forth. Corey Crooms enters the portal here from Western Michigan. And I just want to bring up, like, he had an awesome year from a market share perspective for Western Michigan. Let me bring it up real quick. I don't want to say it wrong. 42% weighted dominator this year at Western Michigan, which is huge. Granted, it was his fourth year, I think. Yeah, fourth year. So late breakout, all that. I'm not saying he's an NFL talent, but I think he could potentially go somewhere. Whether it's G5, I'd be all in, and P5, maybe a little less so. But I think he's a guy to keep an eye on because he was really, really dominant this year for Western Michigan. And he had a good year as a junior as well.
Yeah, there's a quarterback that I meant to bring up earlier, and I forgot. Devin Leary.
I was going to say we forgot about him.
Yeah, he was getting a lot of draft capital buzz coming into the season. Obviously, bad year. Injuries kind of ruined the season for him. A lot of rumors that he's likely going to go somewhere where he can rebuild that draft stock or compete for a national championship. I think Notre Dame is the perfect fit for him. There are other rumors as well that wherever he goes, there's already about 1 to 2 wide receivers that will be following him to that team. Be very intrigued to see where he lands. I still think he's a decent quarterback. I don't know that he's that QB 4 or 5. A lot of people had him listed at going into the NFL draft this season, but I do think he's an intriguing guy. Had a great season last year for NC State. This year, obviously, again, mentioned dealt with the injuries. NC State, unfortunately, just dealt with a lot of different issues, but I'd like to see where he goes. I think Notre Dame would actually be a good fit behind that offensive line. He's able to get a wide receiver, too, to come with them. Could be a very intriguing team next year.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting. And then you would imagine Tyler Buckner, who I really like and I never thought made a lot of sense in the Notre Dame offense, could maybe go somewhere that he could be unlocked. So that would be a downstream effect of that, which would be very interesting. Devin Leary's been kind of mentioned in UF circles, at least on message boards, and people maybe wishing that into relevance. I think he would make sense because I personally don't think Napier's offense really needs or wants a primary rushing quarterback. I think that they want to hand the ball off to 3 different backs rotating the ball. And then I think he kind of wants his quarterback to just be on time and accurate, which Leary would fit that bill. So as a Gator, I think that would be an actual sneaky fit because I don't think Napier necessarily needs like AR or an AR clone. But yeah, he's going to be a big, big name. I mean, he's going to go somewhere and start right away, no questions asked, and probably have a really nice year next year. Before we go into other players, and I mean, I'm free. I can keep going. I don't know if you really wanted to cut this off at an hour or whatever, but 2 offers just came in for guys in the portal. One we talked about, Dante Cephas just got an offer from Miami, Florida.
Okay.
And then we have, we didn't talk about him yet, but Keegan Johnson, a receiver who went to Iowa for 2 years and has certainly flashed. Like he actually got on the field as a true freshman and made some plays, transferring out of Iowa, thank God. And he just got an offer from Notre Dame. So getting big, major, high Power 5 offers. Keegan Johnson, I think he could be very interesting depending on where he goes and gets unlocked. Hopefully the next Charlie Jones. Another player I want to throw out here that we haven't talked about just yet is where is he? Shoot, I've lost my. Oh, okay. 2 FIU players. 2 FIU players. Tyrese Chambers, which we know he's going to be like a 6th-tier guy. I think he could be interesting for fantasy if he's a G5. If he goes to another G5 team, very good, deep threat, all that. Power 5, I don't really know, but a guy who I think could like actually make some waves in the P5 might be Rivaldo Fairweather. This is the first tight end we've talked about. I think he's about 6'5", 240-ish. He actually put up some numbers in that FIU offense, like, 350 yards or something and 5 touchdowns. But as a tight end in the FIU offense, it's actually pretty reasonable, pretty decent. I went back and looked at his high school tape today. I'd never even heard of him. But he was actually a 3-star. He was an 80 on 24/7. So that's like not that terrible. A known commodity when he went to FIU out of South Florida. And then he looks athletic. I mean, he's a big guy. There's some basketball highlights, like throwing down some monster jams. He looks athletic. He's a big dude. I think he could be very interesting. And he's had some production. I mean, at FIU to put up 350 yards and 5 touchdowns as a tight end at FIU, like that's not nothing, because they don't do well throwing the ball. He had 426 yards and 3 touchdowns this year. Good for almost a 20% dominator, which for a tight end really is not that bad. So I think he could be pretty interesting. He's finished his 3rd year, so he'd be going into his 4th year somewhere. I'd keep an eye on that name. That for tight ends, we're always looking for a productive tight end in C2C.
Yeah, real quick, I want to just show on here. So on the website, and we have some other categories on there. Unfortunately, they're not showing, but we'll get that fixed. We have all of these players that have entered the transfer portal from a fantasy perspective listed on here. We are continually updating this. As you can see on the far right, you have the school that they are currently at, and if they get a new offer, like Marcus Allen, who went from Wisconsin to Minnesota. We have their C2C rank, and then Alfred has actually put in their years of eligibility on there, as well as their, I
Home
believe,
state.
home state, and then we
So
have
you,
their fantasy points per game as well, which will all be
mhm.
on there hopefully by tonight. There was an issue with that, didn't get formatted correctly, so that got moved, but that will be popping up on there no later than the next couple hours, as I'm being reassured by my good friend Colin Decker literally right now that all that will be, and there it is actually. Look at that. He took care of it right then and there on the spot. So as you can see, we have our
Beautiful.
C2C ranking, fantasy points per game in 2022, and then Alfred added the recruiting class and home state. And again, this is just for the fantasy relevant guys. So 24/7 Sports, I mean, look, they are amazing at what they do. They've got all the players in there, defensive, offensive linemen. We here focusing solely on the fantasy angle. So if you just want to come and say, hey, who are the guys that I need to be worrying about for my C2C leagues? They are all here. We have not missed one guy that I know of so far. With 3 or 4 of us trying to diligently make sure we're paying attention to this as much as we possibly can. So check that out. That is part of the free version of the website. So you do not have to pay. If you want to, great. There's obviously many different memberships you can check out. We just wanted to show that to anybody watching YouTube wise. You're interested in the fantasy angle there. We've got that taken care of. We'll continue to keep that updated for, I believe it's the next 45 days. So it's crazy that we're talking about all these names in just day one. And we've got 45 days or 44, I guess, at this point left to go. And there's still rumors that we're going to see some high-end names going into the portal. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there. Heard rumors that, you mentioned Ty Simpson was getting some buzz on some message boards yesterday. Drake May has gotten a lot of buzz that he may be entering the transfer portal. So we could see some big names hitting the transfer portal here over the next couple of days. It is not over with yet. I think we will likely see another massive wave hit after the bowl games, because I think a lot of these guys want to try and give it to then. A lot of those bowl games start in the next, 10 days. So kind of want to give it time, see what it looks like. And then maybe after that bowl game, like, you know what, it's time. I've decided what I want to do and go. So I would not be surprised if we don't see another massive kind of wave come after the bowl games.
Yeah, and just a note of like, if you're like, why did you put home state? That's really just so you can form your own conspiracy theories as to like where they may be going next. To be like, oh, he wants to go home. Let me think of all the, universities in Texas that this guy might want to go back to. So that's just for you all to, think about and come up with your own hypothesis as to where they might land. And it's just nice to know, because that's, the two big things that I think we should think about. Everyone has their own theory, but basically when a guy's transferring, he probably wants to go somewhere that he knows people. So coaching connections, or going back home, or going back closer to home. I think those are the top two things you should look at. Of course, there could be some other factors, but I think more often than not, guys follow coaches and relationships. So think about, was there a coordinator at this certain university that he may go join, or whatever. If you're always wondering where's this person going to go, think about those two things and then go from there.
Yeah, the relationship side of thing is definitely big. As you just mentioned, we've seen a lot of that. That's why Austin Reed has gotten some. Apparently, he has a fairly good relationship with Jeff Brom, who we talked about at the beginning of the show. A lot of these players are doing that, and these coaches keep in contact with you guys, especially kids that they recruited, because they always know that transfer portal is there. So that is going to do it for us tonight, though. We will constantly probably do some more quick hitting transfer portal shows. If a big name enters and goes to a school, we'll probably do some shorts. So look for that on the YouTube channel. We'll obviously be talking about this throughout all of our shows on the network. Is this going to be a big deal heading into bowl season? So we will have that covered. And again, if you just want to go look at the sheet, you can find it at campus2canton.com. I'll put a link of it in the description below if you're watching this later. It is free to look at. You can go in there and check all that out. Alfred, thank you so much for taking an hour or so out of your time tonight to talk about the transfer portal. It's getting excited. Some of the favorite time of the year for us. We're diving into freshman transfer portal, bowl season. Like, there is no offseason for college football. I said there's no offseason for the NFL. There really is. There is no offseason for college football.
It's crazy. I mean, I was looking forward to this for a long time. And like you said, the off season is really our on season. I mean, There's so much prep. This is when we're going to start getting in some mock drafts and real drafts for the college fantasy football, C2C startups, things like that. In season, it's really just like that grind of week to week to week to week and seeing how your teams perform. But now is when we get to actually manage our teams, do drafts, look at the freshmen, and see who's going to come in and help our teams. This is when all the work is done. Once the season goes, I mean, it's been wound up and it just like goes on its own. But now we can actually do stuff.
Yep, I'm excited about it. Again, thanks, Alfred. We will talk to everybody again soon.